But I think with the 14th Doctor specials in the rearview mirror, and with 15th time currently ongoing as of this video's air date...
Yep, that was me. A year ago, writing that video going into Gatwa's run of Doctor Who, thinking it was going to be some kind of massive game changer on our hands here for the franchise. Not at all realizing what we were going through was not going to be that. But it was not the disaster that everyone online was apparently trying to convince me that it was for the last year or so. However, I'll be honest, I didn't think we'd be here 1 year later when I wrote that video, already saying goodbye to Gatwa as the 15th iteration of the Doctor. I honestly thought that we would get him for at least a few more specials, or even a season if we were lucky about that one. However, it looks as though Gatwa has actually confirmed that fact online, as it's not some big twist for the specials, and he's coming back after the fact. This is truly his exit as the Doctor. But really, if that is to be the case, it's a bit of a bummer given the fact that the second RTD run has only lasted about 18 episodes with one Doctor, a feat of which hasn't been done since the 12-episode run of Eccleston back 2 decades ago. Which admittedly is a tiny bit fitting, but it's making me want more of Gatwa than wondering what the hell is next for the Whoniverse. Especially given that for the better part of the last 6 months we've had all these supposed fans for the franchise calling for the death of Doctor Who due to its supposed wokeness, as it were. As well as gossip rags online going on and on about how Ncuti's rumoured exit meant it was coming to an end again. Except this time, the fans weren't begging for the BBC to bring the show back with a cringy "We Are the World" song for their fandom. But they were certainly doing equally cringy acts in Facebook feeds 24/7, and existing on Twitter, period. So to counteract my sadness for losing arguably the most naturally charming Doctor since Smith, and ending a run that arguably had so much more promise left in it than where we left it off at, let's talk a little bit about the run that was Ncuti Gatwa's time at the TARDIS. This is a positive post-mortem on the 15th Doctor. Now, much like the video that this one is being made in response to, before I get to talking about what I liked from Gatwa's run on the series, let's rip the band-aid off and talk about the bunch of stuff that I didn't like about his run. This time, however, I'm going to be a bit more nitpicky about my takes on this, as I did have much to complain about compared to my last video on Doctor Who, where I had a laundry list of complaints going into it. But I still have some problems with this run. To show you going into the positives, I'm not going in with rose-tinted glasses on. So without any further stalling, let's start off with our negatives, which starts with, number 1, the seasons are still too damn short.
I made it a point during the 13th Doctor video last year when talking about Flux's 6-episode run, how I felt like they could barely tell a good enough story with barely any episodes to work with, especially for something as high concept of a long story akin to Trial of a Time Lord's arc. And unfortunately, I am here to tell you that problem hasn't gotten any better since the last time we spoke, as the 8-episode run order has now seemingly become the status quo for Doctor Who, and before I get a bunch of people saying it's actually 9, the specials do not count in the official order and were tacked on to make it seem longer. And even if they did count towards the season orders, it still wouldn't make anything better, as Gatwa's 2-season run only lasted 18 episodes in total, 19 if you count the giggle where he debuted as the Doctor. But this effectively means that this entire run of Doctor Who is the shortest run since Eccleston's lone season at 13 episodes in total. With that stat alone, it makes me worried for the future of Doctor Who if this is going to be the new normal for season lengths, because I'll be real with all of you here. If the seasons aren't going to go past 8 or 9 episodes each time, it paints a bigger picture of this new era underneath Disney and the BBC co-producing this series to be a bit worrying, to say the least. Well, because, well, yes, it means we do potentially have less seasons with episodes like Love and Monsters, Orphan 55, Boomtown, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, and as much as it pains me to have to say this because he's my favorite of New Who, your In the Forest of the Night episodes to each run. I hate to be the bearer of bad news like this, but this leads me to my second issue with Gatwa's run. Number 2. The good to bad episode ratio is whack. By this I mean, we've only got 18 episodes of Gatwa only to work with here, and if we were being completely honest with ourselves on which ones we really can't see coming back to in later watch-throughs, except for the ones who had not seen it themselves, then to be completely honest here, there's only one full pre-Flux season of Doctor Who for Gatwa's entire run that I would be wanting to revisit for my own personal enjoyment. Which means that for every 2 or 3 episodes of Gatwa's entire run of the series, there is one bad episode waiting as part of it. And yes, I am using bad in quotation marks because I can safely say I only really dislike 2 or 3 of them at best, and the other 3 are just not my personal cup of tea. But that is still an unhealthy ratio to have, given that even Whittaker's run had a better ratio, in my opinion, of episodes that were good, and other episodes that were downright terrible. Consider this to be a continuation of the previous problem, if you like, and not its own individual issue at hand. But the two definitely go hand in hand in terms of the issues plaguing this new era of modern Who, to the point where I hope that whatever they do with the series next, I hope one of the first things is extending the season orders again, if only to stop this from being a problem. And if you're wondering which episodes I wasn't a fan of real quick, I'm going to get to more of them in detail very shortly, but to whet your appetite, Space Babies, Dot and Bubble, Joy to the World, The Robot Revolution, Lucky Day, and Story of the Engine. But that isn't to say those episodes alone are the only episodes that seem to have hints of badness within them, because unfortunately I gotta be real with you all here on my third point, which happens to be number 3. Has the writing under RTD gotten worse? This is probably an issue I have a lot more fresh in my mind, as while this season has been airing, I've actually been watching the first run of Russell T Davies' run for Doctor Who, and wrapped up on watching it the same week that Gatwa's finale aired. So having had that comparison to go to while I've been watching the second run of RTD alongside it, something came to mind for me a lot while I was watching this run. Has RTD's direction for Who gotten worse? And for the record, that isn't me saying that Who's writing as a whole has gotten a lot worse. Episodes I listed before aside, this series has actually had some very good bits of prose, and honestly some really good rewelding of canon that I've seen in a very long time, which was honestly needed after some of the more divisive story bits for Doctor Who as of late. No, when I say, has RTD's direction for Who gotten worse? I ask this because his direction for Who previously seemed like it had more hits to it than this one did. And honestly here, felt like it could do a lot more morally grey aspects to it than RTD's current run, where I could honestly count the amount of times on one hand where it felt like it had the same energy from his initial time with Eccleston and Tennant. Not only that, but it feels like at times he's really let his successor at Moffat inspire him in the worst ways possible, as Russell has really loved focusing on a lot of the mystery aspects surrounding this run of Who, and just leaving them off on notes that never really get brought up again or resolved. Take, for example, the entire mystery surrounding Ruby Sunday in Season 1. In particular, this weird anomaly events that seem to always happen whenever she was in danger, or things in particular were going to happen to her, or how it seemed like she was this weird fixed point in time, and if she was taken out of it, the entire fabric of the universe would unravel? Yeah. Never really brought up again once she leaves and exits the TARDIS, save for a few hints here and there in the second season of Gatwa's run, and one moment in the most recent episode with hints at that nature at the very end of it, as that is the thing that causes the final conflict in that episode to occur. Sure, RTD himself isn't done with Doctor Who again yet, so maybe this might get properly resolved once Season 3 of Modern Who happens, if Ruby returns alongside the rest of the team on Earth. But for where we are now on this journey at the end of 15's run, which usually means the companion story has ended as well alongside it, I am very much concerned that the many story threads of Ruby won't ever get resolved, and given how much importance she was given in both seasons of Gatwa's run, it does make me a bit sad if it is, because it felt like there was something more that we hadn't properly looked into as of yet. And that's not even really the worst problem I have with RTD's writing here, which arguably has to go to the fact that even after 2 decades away, he still has trouble with writing these massive ending story arcs which seem to have big stakes behind them every single time, and with there being seemingly no real way out of it. Only to find them either having a Deus Ex Machina way out of it in the second part, or conveniently manage to overthrow the threat within the second half. It was a problem as far back as Sound of Drums and Lost of the Time Lords, and hasn't really gotten all that much better in this recent run of RTD, with The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death, and especially with it fresh in our minds of Wishworld and Reality War. If anything, RTD's way of going about these finales is all set up throughout the entire season like it was doing back in the day with the Master and Dr. Donna prophecies, and lack of real payoff by the end of it when it comes time to actually put these all into play and properly resolve the arc-long storylines. But honestly, even putting aside the endings of each season, episodes like the aforementioned 6 he wrote, like Space Babies and Dot and Bubble, where the concept either completely borders between silly in the worst way and cringy in a bad way at times for the former, or outright feels like it could have been a much better concept for a Dr. Light story if the ending wasn't such a drag and the characters were completely irredeemable. Or, in the case of Robot Revolution, the plot itself was just built upon a lol, the villain is a controllable asshole ex-boyfriend of the new companion, and Lucky Day following this up with the concept of, hey, what if our villain was a QAnon-level incel who ends up becoming a recurring villain for later in this season? It gives off a vibe that Davies could have done a better job overall. Because while I do love me some QAnon incel alt-right assholes getting got, I feel like the overall execution of these plots could have been done so much better overall. Especially in the case of Conrad Clark, because good lord, talk about wasted potential with this guy with how his entire arc comes to an end in the recent episode. Not spoiling it, even though it's a week after the fact, but fuck me running the climax for him is such a male loneliness epidemic level ending for him. Like seriously, what the fuck, RTD? This is to say that while I will talk at length about the good moments of Russell's second tenure of writing in a moment, I am gonna be completely honest with all involved. I think unless the next season makes some drastic changes to the overall formula that RTD has made for himself this time around, despite what I have to say about it and the positives, I am very worried about the long-term longevity of Russell's writing for future seasons underneath the new regime overall. However, he is not the only one at fault here. He may be the head writer in charge of the entire thing, but some bits of this season can't be put all on him being the problem. Because while I will go and bat for Juno Dawson later in this video for bits that she did very good at times, I absolutely have to question the morality behind her putting someone who was a victim of a genocide and became an anarchist as a result as the main villain of Interstellar Song Contest, and have it be seen in such a way where we're meant to believe that both sides are equally bad at this? Like, the fuck? No! The corporation hosting the Galaxy Eurovision is entirely in the wrong here, and if they didn't literally farm an entire planet, then the Hellions would have to go to the lengths they were desperate enough to go into in order to do what they needed to do, and the fact that we have to go, no, both sides are bad in current climate 2025 is a bit fucked, all considered. And Moffat's return episodes, while I am going to praise one of them in a moment, I have a massive bone to pick about the things that were being brought up in Joy to the World, because while I do love the concept that 15 had to sift through in the middle part of the episode as a nice way to showcase Gatwa's overall range when solo and with no companions by his side, holy fuck, that finale with Joy and her mum and her rant about the stuff during the COVID lockdowns felt like Moffat was wanting to focus on writing his own journal about how the COVID lockdowns affected him personally, rather than trying to write something a bit more hopeful in regards to how people would have felt during that period. Especially for a fucking Christmas special. And that's not even me saying that people did have to suffer through that kind of thing 5 years ago, or the way they felt about it is being dismissed because everyone had to struggle with something during the lockdowns of 2020, or even the fact that the reigning government at the time broke their own laws to host parties wasn't fucked up. But using the character of Joy to essentially be used as your own personal mouthpiece feels cheap and preachy, and felt like we were being back underneath Chibnall again. And realistically, I don't think anyone wants to be reminded of that era as soon as we came out of it, and it arguably made for one of the worst Christmas special episodes in a damn long time as a result, amplified by the fact that it's just a nothing burger of an episode aside from Anita and the Time Hotel becoming relevant in the season 2 finale. Hell, you wanna know what it just reminded me of? Moffat's other Christmas specials aside from the ones where they were just regeneration episodes. That's the problem here. I think Moffat just can't write Christmas specials to save his life, and this was a big reminder as to why most of them were either mid at best or blunders at their worst. God, fuck off, Moffat, you fucking hack! This is why you should only come back for like one episode every 2 years again. Fuck!
Wait, what was I complaining about again? Oh, right.
The overall writing has been a bit not so great aside from Russell is what I was getting at, so he doesn't have to deserve all the blame in regards to writing during his run not being the best as it used to be. But with any luck, it might get better post-15. Who can say, really? But I've talked my head off about one of my bigger complaints at this run. Let's wrap up the negatives of a bit more of a smaller complaint overall, which is number 4. Modern Who has a tone problem. With this one, I mean, the past 2 seasons of Doctor Who really have no real clue on what vibe they wanted to go for, something of which we haven't seen in a very long time from Who. Hell, I'd argue since the TV movie back in the 90s with McGann's first outing. Or, to put it in a different manner and describe each run, Eccleston's run felt like the real first new beginning of an era of Who after so long with how it set up so much of the new status quo for the series. Tennant's era felt like building upon what made it so much more grander, while also calling back to what came before Eccleston. Smith's era felt a bit more eccentric at the best of times, while also reminding us that yes, there is a lot of shit that has happened and will continue to happen to the Doctor as it goes on, and that is fine, while also continue to expand upon aspects of the Time War in more detail. Capaldi's era felt like the climax of the era that began with Eccleston, with vibes similar to that of classic Who-run Doctors such as Troughton, Colin, and even McCoy at times during the run, while also being able to tell some unique stories as well as closing out ones from when the run began with Eccleston. And Whittaker, despite the all-over-the-place nature of it, felt like the aftermath of the era, trying to rebuild from what came before, only to be pulled right back into the dredges of the worst period of the Doctor mentally, and needing to completely reset itself after the fact in order to move forward. Gatwa's era, unfortunately, doesn't know if it wants to move on from past Whittaker's era and forge into something else entirely, or linger on in the past and explore this new status quo with the pantheon of gods, the universe being half thanks to Flux, and the Rani coming back. More on her in a bit. And honestly, that's one of the biggest issues of all, because we should have been able to figure out what this era was really about by this point, and instead, just as we were getting to that point, Gatwa regenerates at the absolute worst time possible. Again, this could have been so much better if Gatwa was given more episodes in each season, if RTD's writing was as sharp as it was 2 decades ago, and especially if Gatwa didn't leave just when things were getting good for this run at last. All things that seem to be out of the collective hands of each party involved, sure, but it really does speak volumes that things definitely would have been better if we had more time and more chances to see it flesh out. But for what we got, now that we spent a good bulk of the video running down the worst of it, how about we spend a bit more time talking about the good of this era? Huh? So let's start with arguably one of my bigger positives of this list. Number 1. Doctor Who feels fun again. And no, I don't mean fun as in it felt like a chore to watch Doctor Who until this point. I mean fun as in I've tuned in each week and been greatly surprised by each new aspect that has been shown off episode to episode, and arguably have looked forward to whatever the hell has come after it. From all the way back at Church on Ruby Road, I sat with excitement as the series presented its opening act for Gatwa in such a bold statement that made you know for certain it was going to be a much different experience with Doctor Who. I mean, for God's sake, he goes to a fucking bar and our main gal is friends with a non-voiced trained trans femme rocker, for God's sake. How much more obvious does this era need to get? Not only that, but the musical numbers in this were amazing stuff as well. Gatwa showing he has pipes in the role was good teasing for what was going to come in the series, because it wasn't the last time we were going to have singing in this Doctor Who era. Because while I may have a lot of problems with Space Babies following on immediately after Church on Ruby Road, my god did its follow-up in The Devil's Court deliver and then some. Maestro as a villain was so unique, and their actor, Drag Race runner Jinx Monsoon, played them to such perfection, I personally hope we haven't seen the last of them yet. And while I have some major problems with Joy to the World being some of the worst writing of Moffat's entire run of Doctor Who period, having him come back to write Boom arguably reminded me why I liked him so much when he was self-contained and not focused on some weird emotionally manipulative side plot, because god damn it, he can write some unique stories damn well when he feels inspired to do so, and Boom was no exception to that. And then you have unique concepts like continuing episodes like 73 Yards, which put the focus on a companion stranded without their doctor, something of which we don't get to see often, but I'll talk about where they might have gotten ideas from in a moment. My god, was this a highlight of Gatwa's run. Lux showcased a much more exciting concept by utilizing mixed media presentation in the showing of the series, something of which that hadn't been done before, and flexed the fact that they were capable of doing stuff like that with Disney money behind their budget, while still showing they could be camp as they could be. The well made me literally go, oh shit, for the first time in a while at Doctor Who stories due to the twist of it being a sequel to Midnight. Be such a bonkers thing to go back to after all this time and establish that yes, even the Doctor can have PTSD from more than just the dogs as their enemy, while also being a very good retread of a concept in a much darker fashion. And finally, Interstellar Song Contest was such a brilliantly placed diversion right before the ending point. Well timed as well, given the actual Eurovision was taking place the same week it aired to our knowledge. Had some amazing stakes behind it, and it has Dugadoo. Given that this was, by all accounts, something that Murray Gold had just done and was given no context to the writers or production team on, the fact that the team made something that the creator of such legendary themes of the franchise to this point did for a singular jape into a meme and then some after the fact? Really, what more proof do you need that it feels fun to watch this series again? This isn't to say there weren't some darker bits to talk about at times, but we'll cover that more in a bit here. But the overall complete package of Gatwa's run really does give a sense that it feels like the creative team are having a good time with the revitalized feeling that has come from the second RTD run, despite the problems listed above, which can be seen in Number 2. The legacy villains presented were great, if a bit mixed in execution. Say, have you grown tired of the Master or Daleks or Cybermen, or literally most of the legacy villains that seem to be overdone by this point in New Who? I know it may be sacrilegious to say, but personally, I kinda am at this point as well. While I do mourn the fact that Gatwa never got to face off against the Daleks himself, as that basically is a rite of passage all Doctors to go through. Hell, Whittaker faced off against them 3 times in her tenure alone. But generally speaking, I am glad that we were seeing more focus be spread across the entirety of the legacy villains from the past, with the Celestial Toymaker, Sutek, Thorani, and Omega being the main revisits of the past to showcase during this run of the Doctor. While I will definitely say I wish the Celestial Toymaker had more than just wacky hijinks as his main bread and butter during this run, I gotta be honest when I say that Neil Patrick Harris plays him too excellently, and the 2 main moments of him running down all of the companions' deaths during the last 3 iterations of the Doctor, and dispelling their remarks in return with, "Oh, well, that's alright then!" And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention their infamous Spice Up Your Life dance sequence, which only Neil Patrick Harris could have done in such camp fashion. We are truly removed from the days of him being Barney Stinson, for sure. And thank God for it. Sutek's revival as the big bad of season 1 as well, while a bit trite and unable to be explained more than just, oh, he's been tagging along with the TARDIS defeat decades ago, that's why he's so powerful now. His use as being the big bad and also has one of the most powerful and earth-shaking reveals of a legacy villain since Derek Jacobi uttered I Am the Master in 2007. Also, the design of modern Sutek is awe-inspiring, going from his imprisoned form in Pyramids of Mars to this CGI monster, and I use the term monster here in a positive sense, and became nigh unstoppable until in RTD finale fashion he was eventually trounced, but not before being given a defeat by literally being thrown into the time vortex. Metal as fuck if you ask me. And then, finally, the one I arguably got excited for the most out of all the returning villains, the Ronnie. Now, being upfront here, I kind of had a feeling that Mrs. Flood being the Ronnie was the case as far back as the time we saw her in church on Ruby Road when she broke the fourth wall. While I did feel it out of character, I was like, it's the Ronnie immediately. And when she was revealed to be her in the Interstellar Song Contest credit scene, only one word could describe my feeling upon seeing the Ronnie be revealed at last.
Vindication!
Because my God, I've been wanting the Ronnie to come back into the fold for a very, very, very long time. Even thinking that Missy was potentially a version of her back in the day before it was revealed that she was in fact a female iteration of the Master. Especially given that the last time we saw her was back in Dimensions in Time of all things. It's nice to finally say that we have something better to refer back to her for her most recent appearance in Doctor Who media. Officially anyway, she's been around a Big Finish for a hot minute. And yes, while I do in fact have some problems with how her plan pans out in the end, especially given that the newer, more accurate to how she looked previously Ronnie portrayed by Archie Punjabi was the one who no longer is around, and Anita Dobson's portrayal as Mrs. Flood remains, I kind of hope that isn't the last time we see the Ronnie in Modern Who, especially with her escaping, meaning that we may very well see her if RTD continues past this next season of it. All in all, it isn't perfect, but it's been an enjoyable ride, all considered. I do personally hope that this means we may get some more legacy villains returning in the future. Hell, if they could bring back the Ronnie after so long and RTD is dead set on expanding the Timeless Child idea more, why not finally follow up on Morbius? Just a thought anyway. That being said, however, while I have very much loved the recent re-editions of characters from the past of Doctor Who, I am very much more happy that the head writer isn't being a centrist coward about it anymore. Which leads me to... Number 3. RTD isn't afraid of writing queer Who anymore. So yeah, I intentionally didn't talk about Rogue in my rundown of each episode, because I wanted to save it for its own little section alongside a grander theme which I have noticed in Davies' recent run. The fact that despite the company co-bankrolling it being cowards on the topic, RTD is determined to make the Whodiverse queer as fuck. And really, to anyone who felt this was a surprise, I beg you to look at the work Davies did after he left Who the first time. This is the guy who wrote It's a Sin and years in the aftermath of his leaving of Doctor Who. If you didn't know he was one of us by this point, this run certainly made you know that he was. I mean, when one of your first acts says he did as head writer again was give Donna Noble a trans daughter, that should have been the tone setter right off the bat that this wasn't for the right-wing crowd anymore, if they believed Doctor Who to be for them anyway by that point. And if getting a trans femme drag queen in as a villain wasn't that for them either, then oh boy was Rogue going to be the moment that cemented it, because when we saw Gatwa and Rogue smacking lips with each other on screen, not even gonna lie, I was absolutely gobsmacked in the best way possible because, in my own words, the Doctor can be bi? That's not to say Rogue as an episode without this moment is nothing, mind you, but it just made an already amazing episode with a fun concept of Doctor Who does Bridgerton so much better alongside a totally heartbreaking finale which, given we saw Rogue and Wishworld somehow made contact, gives me hope that even after Gatwa's regeneration, we're still not done with him yet. But in general, this run has proven that at least Russell seems to be unafraid of showing just how queer he can make his writing be by this point. What makes me hope this doesn't come back to bite the series in the ass eventually, but only time will properly tell on that matter. Until then, I am just happy we're getting it more in Doctor Who. Because in case you didn't get the memo, Doctor Who is unashamedly leftist media, it always has been, and it's only going to continue to be going forward. Especially given that they're letting openly trans writers on board on the production team of Juno Dawson, who wrote Interstellar Song Contest, but has also been responsible for Doctor Who Redacted and a few Big Finish stories for Torchwood previously. So her experience with Doctor Who directly now means that more doors are opening as a result. However, Rogue's episode at this point did leave us into the direction of one revelation in particular, which, alongside a few other bits and bobs throughout the rest of the series run, made me happy for the fact that we've begun to see one trend become prominent in modern Who writing, and have one long-forgotten piece of media finally reclaimed with... Number 4. The reintegration of Big Finish and the canon welding of Scream of the Shalka. So, if it hasn't been made completely obvious by now, Doctor Who is one of my biggest hyperfixations outside of anime and manga period and Kingdom Hearts, to the degree that in the last decade or so, I felt a bit of my personal time on plane rides and other forms of long-haul transport listening and trying to get through the massive catalogue of Big Finish audios. Initially, I spent my time listening to most of 6, 7, and 8 runs, but over time I expanded out to the majority of the monthly range being under my belt, eventually moving on to side stuff like Bernice Summerfield's range and Iris Wildtime, and the Torchwood range of stories. The point here being that for the past 7 years, I've been on a personal quest to get most of the Big Finish library underneath my belt because I've begun to adore the expanded universe of Doctor Who outside the main television show and its side content. Another piece of it being the Scream of the Shalka story, the Flash anime continuation before New Who started up, which was released in 2003 as a web exclusive with Richard E. Grant as the Doctor, something of which had been done mostly lost to time until recently when I managed to find recordings of it floating online. And while this video isn't a full-blown dissection on Shalka, I do find it fascinating that this was the next step of Who that they would have gotten down, if not for New Who starting up a few years later on television again. While I feel it's not a full-blown you must watch this if you love Doctor Who territory, I'd say if you're curious about where the direction of Who could have gone in an alternate universe, this is right up your alley. I bring both up with regards to this current run of Doctor Who more than to just showcase some brownie points in regards to my personal knowledge of Who by this point, which I really didn't need to given all the hyperfixation talk I did last time with 13, but more to have a jumping off point to talk about the fact that I think this run more than any other has taken a lot of aspects from Big Finish stories than previous runs have to this point, in a positive way mind you, but it's also wanting to be more respectful of all aspects of Who's past, which now includes Shalka into the mix with a little blink and you'll miss it cameo from Grant's Doctor in the lineup that Rogue showed off. For the Big Finish stuff, easiest one I can immediately point to was seeing aspects of Natural History of Fear and Live 34 be showed off in the recent ending to Gatwa's run in Wish World, in the way that all of the main cast have found themselves in a world where they are mostly different people and they are kept in fear by a police state punishing anyone who seems to act unright with their new world. Going back to Sutek and Rani, for instance, as well, aspects from their own Big Finish stories seem to be implemented with their current incarnations as well, particularly the Triumph of Sutek box set and the Age of Sutek with how it's inspired the recent run of the Egyptian god. And the Rani's previous outings with the Rani Elite and Planet of the Rani showcasing a few past encounters with the Sixth Doctor, and also establishing some newer aspects to the characters since their last true implementation in Time of the Rani. I'd urge everyone watching this video, if you're interested in Big Finish and wanting a jumping off point for these recent iterations, I'd recommend those 4 off the bat as being the ones to go to if you want to get into Big Finish with legacy villains that have returned. All in all, however, especially given that writers from Big Finish are coming into the fold as writers for the show directly, I'd love to see more episodes take inspiration from it, as it really isn't a new thing, as Dalek was basically a jubilee in New Who coding, and it's been a badly kept secret for so long in that regard. But overall, it's been nice getting to see Big Finish inspire more stories within modern Who, but these are all pieces of the overall experience. What about the man at the core of the story, as well as the heart of the TARDIS itself? To quote the man himself, "It's been an absolute joy to see Gatwa on screen as the Doctor all considered. From the minute he bi-generated in the giggle and made a good first impression to his regeneration that came far too soon in my opinion, Ncuti has been a ray of sunshine for the show in a time where it absolutely needed it. Especially given that the series has been going through quite a turmoil-filled time the last 5 years. It really does feel like, despite some fans online giving some unlikable takes online in the sake of an anti-woke crusade, I feel like Ncuti has brought some of the most energy to the role since Capaldi, and definitely the best vibes since Smith overall, and that has been a hard feat, mind you, even as Tennant's run felt like a pastiche more than anything, if I can be honest. Meanwhile, Ncuti brought some passion to the role for the first time in a while, giving unique energy that nobody else had brought to it, and, did I mention it enough, brought their queerness into the role that no writer or actor dared to really try and bring to it, and my god was this the role really for it. Or to close off a bit from before, if 13 was the Doctor from the ashes of the post-Time War era of Who, and 14 was the bridging point between the Time War and modern era Who, then Ncuti's role as 15 was breathing new life into a brave new world full of surprises and no true expectations for the first time in a very, very long time. If only the era itself reflected that energy overall. Not only that, but he showed a side of the Doctor that we hadn't really seen coming out in quite some time for this era. It showed the Doctor finally taking their own advice to 14 and being allowed to process their feelings in the moment, instead of stewing on them or bottling them up because the world has endured yet another crisis they have to fix.
I saw a lot of people online say that they cry too much now compared to back in the day. And all I have to say on the matter is, so fucking what if they cry too much now? Have you seen the shit that they've had to deal with through the past 50 years of existence?
Because let me tell you now, if you even had to deal with half of an incarnation of the Doctor's life, then you'd fold instantly. Especially from any iteration from War Doctor onwards. None of us could handle going through an intergalactic, let alone interdimensional war with several genocidal beings, some of them being our own kind, without curling into the fetal position and bawling your fucking eyes out. Sorry if that was a little bit harsh there, but this was about what the Doctor was going to be about as the core this time around. Properly being able to heal and feeling your emotions at the moment is part of healing, and Gatwa's portrayal showing it in episodes like Dot and Bubble, Rogue, Empire of Death, and especially the well with the aforementioned PTSD from the Nightmare entity comes into play. Hell, you want to know what else sets off their PTSD this season? The moment an Interstellar Song Contest a lot of people took umbrage with in regards to him being a bit more cruel than the usual to Kid when his plan to potentially kill 3 million people is about to go into effect. To that, all I have to say is, well, yes, it was certainly out of character for them. This was the first time in the entire run of Gatwa had ever shown similar Time Lord rage that his predecessors had shown in their darker moments. Think Time Lord Victorious or Smith era post Pons era, or hell, Eccleston's entire run? It's a showcase, honestly, that for as much progress one person can make towards bettering their own mental health, they are unfortunately able to backslide on it at a moment of weakness. This was that for 15 when they were made to confront the idea that this Hellions plot was similar to travesties that they had already had to experience from previous experiences in the Time War, or from the Daleks, or from the Master, and...
I could go on here, really, but the point here overall is that the Doctor has always shown to be a lot more emotional in previous seasons for sure. But this seemingly being the one where it feels like there is healing at last, despite some setbacks, of course.
Not even that, but it's lovely to finally see a Doctor-companion dynamic end at something platonic and not need to go on any further than that, if I can be honest. I mentioned in the 13 video how I grew tired of that trope, and it feels so lovely to see them finally leave companions like Ruby and Belinda off as just companions, and nothing more. No! Wish World doesn't count with Belinda! It wasn't real! Shut your pie holes! And really, I could go on about other aspects of this run outside of what's already been presented, like how RTD proves that Whittaker did just need good writers behind her, with her cameo at the end of the most recent run of episodes, which made me audibly gasp and get so giddy I was almost jumping on the couch watching it. I could go on about how Rose Noble's representation as a trans woman canonically in Who is the biggest middle finger to any right-wing viewers still watching Who, while also being an amazing trans rep in her own right, and Donna being a loving trans mum is also so wholesome it damn near made me cry and made me love Donna herself even more. I could talk about how Unit's resurgence in the Earth team has made them the most relevant they have been since the run with Pertwee, and arguably have them as a group of recurring characters as a result after hinting at it just being a thing during Flux, giving characters like Kate Stewart, Melanie Bush, and the already mentioned Rose Noble and even later Ruby Sunday a staying position in the cast as a result. And that's not even mentioning characters like Shirley, which show disabled people involved in Who as humans with agency behind them in the team, as well as alongside Ruby's family getting involved as more than side characters at times when needed. Point is, while there are still a lot of glaring issues with the modern Who era that we live in as of now, I'd be lying if I said I didn't adore what this era had brought about and why I am deeply saddened that it has already come to a close with Gatwa's departure. I am very much more hopeful about the future of Doctor Who than when I was when I wrote re-evaluating the 13th Doctor for sure. Internet outrage culture and gossip rag sheets be damned, I am pleased with where this season has gone, and I want to hope for the best, even with a weird as hell twist in this regeneration for a second time. But I await to see what the next year of Who looks like going forward, and I am very much excited for what maybe RTD's final season again may bring. And honestly, if Doctor Who can survive this turmoil-filled period, it may very well be immortal after all. This video was made possible through supporter patrons like the ones you're seeing on screen right now. If you like videos like this one and others on this channel, please consider supporting them via the Patreon link and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for the time, and catch you later.